Ottawa and the provinces have struck a deal on early learning and childcare. The federal government is pledging $7 billion over the next 10 years. It aims to open up about 40,000 childcare spaces for low-income and Indigenous families. These subsidized spaces would be aimed for specific groups, including low-income Canadians, Indigenous people, and single parents. The provinces have to use the money to create new spaces and not to top up their own spending. Quebec has its own childcare program and will not sign today's agreement. Bethany Grady is a research officer. She is with the Childcare Resource and Research Unit and is with me now. So Bethany, 40,000 new spaces, $7 billion, 10 years.
Yes.
So will this plan change the reality of childcare that many parents are facing?
So certainly it's a welcome development. I mean, childcare is an issue that we haven't seen the feds play a role in it for such a long time, so we welcome it. However, we don't think it's ambitious enough. 40,000 new spaces is not going to meet the need of many families living across Canada, and the spending we don't feel is enough either. So we welcome it. It's a development, but it's not quite enough.
Okay, well, I want to get to some of that, but
Yes.
let's talk about who it is being targeted and who it is going to help.
Yeah.
So this puts a lot of emphasis on Indigenous families and on low-income kids, right? So that's got to be needed.
That's so needed and so welcome. Certainly, we want an equitable system that addresses the needs of people who need it the most. So we welcome that development, and we think it is going to make a difference for those families. Yes.
Okay, because we're just talking anecdotally.
Yeah.
I know I've got some family that spent, I think they said $2,500 a month in daycare, middle class.
Right.
There are a lot of people in that boat.
Right.
Is this funding going to help middle class families who pay, at least in Toronto, probably in other big cities, sometimes $2,500 for 2 kids in daycare?
Right. Well, the nice thing about Toronto right now is we're in Ontario, and Ontario recently announced that they're going to have their own framework right now and are building a plan themselves. So it depends on provincial leadership as well, of course. However, I don't think it's going to address the needs of the middle class as well as it could and as well as it should.
So you think there should be a universal childcare plan? And tell me what that would mean. So
when we talk about universality, I mean, it's really the bedrock of a solid early childcare and learning program in many countries. When I say universality, advocates don't mean a one-size-fits-all approach. That's not what we mean. What we mean is that any family, no matter where they are, how much money they make, that they can access a childcare space if they want to. That's all that it means. And that we don't want to create lines and divisions based on things like socioeconomic status, because we feel that doesn't really create social cohesion. And it's excluding a large portion of people, the middle class, who still can't afford these programs. So when we mean universal, we mean any child, every child who needs.
But doesn't that become prohibitively expensive if you're basically giving inexpensive childcare, relatively speaking, to wealthier people who could afford to pay more who aren't?
Right. So there's some questions there around how you would fund it and what you would expect. There could be a sliding scale. So if you're low income, you pay nothing. If you're higher income, you pay a little more. But regardless, I mean, if I could use the example of our public education system, if you're high income, low income, you go to the same school. And we want childcare to be seen in that way. Just like the education system, it shouldn't matter where you come from, how much money your family makes. Everyone is in this melting pot in a community, and we feel that childcare should look the same as that.
A lot of people have been talking about how Quebec hasn't signed this deal because Quebec has its own plan.
Right.
And way back when it was $5 or $7 a day daycare.
Right.
It's
and
gone up. So does the rest of the country have something to learn from the Quebec model?
I wouldn't say we would necessarily would. We certainly have. There's things we can learn from it. I don't think it is something that we should replicate entirely. It certainly has its own unique issues, but certainly we could learn a lot from how they're attacking it. I mean, putting dollars and money and time and effort towards building a system. I mean, that's a huge step. So taking the time to do that, I mean, that's so important.
Why is the concept of universality so key for you?
Right. Well, I think for me, I want to see children of all differences be able to interact in one center. I think it drives communities forward. It builds community. So it's such an important principle. Plus, when you look at things like the middle class, like we've been speaking about, they can't afford it. So it really shouldn't be targeted at just low-income families. Everyone should be able to use the service.
Bethany, great to get your insight.
Thank you
very
Thanks
much.
for having me.
And Bethany Grady is with the Childcare Resource and Research Unit.